Now I'd like to introduce Gus Mandel, the Associate Publisher and Editorial-Chief of Autoweek, who will carry on introducing our next speaker. Gus.
How great is that? I mean, to think that we've got some of the most passionate people who are the stewards of motion and design, right here in front of us at the Design Forum. The Design Forum, as you know, is an opportunity to trumpet the sex in the industry. And I think that with this year's theme, which is designed for the next generation, I was asked about that, and it's sort of interpreted any one of a number of ways. It could be the next generation of automobile, it could be the next generation of consumers. I am particularly pleased with our next speaker, because I had a chance to meet both Peter and Bruce in their lair, if you will. Northern California is a hotbed, as you know, for the next digital wave of everything that's pretty cool. The best thing about it, I think, might be that their offices sit hard against a bar right beneath their world headquarters. And we started talking about what they aim to deliver. Cloudcar, and they will come and speak to this, but Cloudcar is something that we may not know we must have. I'm going to give you some numbers, if I might. Every year, about 35 to 45,000 people die on our roads. 35 to 45,000 people die on our roads. Of that, 25% as a result of distracted driving. Now, Autoweek has always championed the idea of higher education in terms of driving. We cannot get away from this notion of we want to do something more in our car than just drive. We want to talk. We want to put on makeup. We want to text. We want to listen to our music. Cloudcar, started by a group of people who really care about the next generation. They are fathers, they are car people, and they are passionate about this whole idea of doing away with distracted driving. So please join me in welcoming Bruce Leak and Peter Barrett of Cloudcar.
Well, thank you for that very generous introduction. We're absolutely delighted to be here and honored to be here in such a famous room. And that with Silicon Valley people, we don't get out very much. So being the company people actually make cars is an honor and an extraordinary delight for us.
Yeah, personally, I'm completely in awe of what you do and have no dream ever to be able to do the types of amazing functional art creation that is, iconic and enduring in our culture. It's really an honor to be here, and I cherish the opportunity to share some of our ideas with you and look forward to the opportunity to having a conversation around this topic that Dr. Jimenez. When we set out at Cloudcar, we took a little bit of retrospective. I mean, the new Corvette is an amazing thing. It's great to be here in the birthplace of the Corvette. When the previous Corvette came out, the world was a different place from the consumer's point of view. There was not an iPhone yet. The iPhone came out 5.5 years ago. It's somewhat middling review. There was a lot of skepticism about whether you could actually functionally type some information on a piece of glass and be effective at it. And back then, that short 5.5 years ago, there was no App Store or even a plan for an app store. And today, 50 billion app downloads later, that short 5 years, the consumer landscape has changed.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to look at the key characteristics of those phones. I mean, one is they make phone calls, obviously. They have a permanent connection to the internet. So having a flat phone with a touchscreen for the first time really allowed it to be a functional web browser. And that was the thing that really, I think, that was a real tipping point, because now they're the computers that won, right? You make 1 billion of them, or more than 1 billion of them every year. They get replaced every year. The software gets replaced every 15 minutes. The services that you're connected to live in the network and can change dynamically. So that ecosystem now runs at an extraordinary rate. I mean, think about a vehicle which has a life of 10 years. Think of a 10-year-old phone. Think of a 2-year-old phone compared to what we have today. So that evolutionary pressure and the rate at which those services are changing is pretty extraordinary. And one key aspect of that is the fact that there are literally millions of applications that live on those devices.
And those applications have changed consumers' expectations in a significant way. Consumers are incredibly spoiled today. When they're out and about, they feel that they have access to everyone and everything instantaneously. And at some level, it's all free and easy. There's an app for everything, and if there's not, there will be soon. And so it's natural that consumers who, you look at any sidewalk today in a major metro area, and you see people heads down, buried in their phone while they're walking. And, it's a dangerous way for a pedestrian. And yet the first thing those consumers say when they get in their cars is that they want all those applications they have on their phone.
Right, so how many people have used their phone in their lap in a vehicle? Show of hands.
Honesty, come on.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, so it looks like we have about 60% of the audience who's actually honest. I mean, I've done it, and when you don't do it, you want to do it. You know it's in your pocket. But it is some combination of lethal or homicidal or suicidal to do that. But that deep desire is there. And there are some people who will tell you, well, look, the answer to this is just project whatever is on the phone onto the screen because you can't resist it and be done with it. And that's very much like asking for a faster horse, right? It's the idea that I just want that in the car. I just want that thing. That's all.
And it's clearly not well thought through. The whole concept of distracted driving tends to drive us to try to figure out what we should prevent people from doing in the car. And what we've learned in looking at closely is it's not how you prevent people from doing things. Abstinence is a tough thing for mankind, especially when they have the solution that they're addicted to and they're used to in their pocket. And so the higher question is not how we prevent people from doing what they're used to in their car, but how we enable them to do what's necessary and what's important to them in their car.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean, productivity apps, or it doesn't mean the vast majority of all those apps that exist out in the App Store. It's about getting those fundamental experiences which you'll miss and rethinking them in a way that's appropriate for the vehicle and the class of things you can do that are appropriate for the vehicle.
One thing you need to realize is that where mobile apps come from and what their goals are. The typical business plan in Silicon Valley says, I'll create an application, I'll distribute it to millions, if not hundreds of millions of people for free. And my business plan, my success strategy is I want that application to engross them, to get them addicted to it. I want them to spend more and more time with it over time, and I want them to come back to it as often as possible. Well, that strategy is exactly the opposite of a solution that's designed for the car. A solution that's appropriate for the car is one in which you look at as rarely as possible and for as short amount of time as possible. And as it gets better and learns what you need, you can not look at it at all. It should be eyes free. And so if one mobile application is inappropriate in the car, the thought of tens or hundreds of thousands of mobile applications where you're spending a huge amount of your cognitive ability just to find that blue round wreck that finds parking for me is clearly, a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, design center of an application which demands your full attention, your fingers, and your eyes. They're all things that you should be using to just drive, right? The only thing you should be touching is the wheel. The only thing you should be looking at is the road. The only thing you should be thinking about is the drive. And apps are, by definition, antithetical to that. They're little hermetically sealed chunks of functionality which want to own the experience while they're running. And they want to differentiate, so this one doesn't work the same way as the other. That they're all siloed in things which are incredibly inaccessible if you have to manipulate them and get into the mind of the vehicle. One thing to do it on the phone, one thing to do on something which you can pinch and zoom and high touch and look at and feel your feet. But that becomes untenable.
And so one thing I'd like to reiterate is that touch is just a long interface for the driver. It's great for the passenger, it's great for a tablet, it's great for a phone, it's great for browsing the web, it's great for playing games, but anything that requires, two eyes, a hand, and significant concentration in order to create an interaction is just a wrong thing for a driver.
So we want to have an enabled driver. We want to have a driver that is focused and can do the things that they want to do. That we do it. I also model for fixing this. And one way to think about it is if you imagine having somebody in the passenger seat and say they have an iPad and hopefully they know a lot about you with a bit of their attractive. They are a really interesting model for what a system could be. So imagine you're driving, what are the scenarios look like? They know where you live. So they're not going to give you directions from your house to the freeway. They know that you have a meeting. They know how to use a map. They know how to launch individual apps. And they're picking away and touching and focusing and zooming and searching and looking for parking, figuring out where the nearest gas station is and telling you which freeway to take. And that's a pretty good experience. Having a human that isn't going to interrupt you, isn't going to say something that's a non sequitur, is going to go when you almost swipe somebody. I mean, there's an enormous increase in value and focus in the driving experience if you had somebody doing that. So why can't we make something like that happen with software?
And so the first thing to do is to try to understand what problem is that intelligent passenger solving? What are they doing that the car can do for you in a scenario where you're there alone?
Yeah, and we start to think about, well, they're a situation they're aware of, right? They can see around them, they can understand what's going on in the vehicle, they can understand, what you're doing, and they can not, they can make choices about what important information is. They can also orchestrate a bunch of different applications, right? Those hard-little shells that they're launching and quitting, they can integrate those services and experiences and make a common observation or a common substrate about what those applications need to do.
And they know what's important and when it's important. And they can get you that information, hopefully before you ask for it, but certainly, very easily when you do ask for it, and they know what the context is.
Yeah, I think they can be predictive because they've seen what you do, right? They know where you're going to work, they know where you're going to school, they know when, they know you're interested in knowing what Charlie will take up because they've seen you do it, and they've seen you do it in ways that individual applications can't. When you think about an app as it runs on an iPhone or a tablet, it only runs for a short amount of time, right? And when you look at actually what those apps are, there's a couple of interesting things that fall out. Like, what's the difference between my gas buddy app and my parking app, right? They're hermetically sealed, but inside it's really a map and a service that is on the internet that's projecting onto a common substrate. Most of those apps aren't really on the phone at all. I mean, Facebook's not on your phone, Google's not on your phone, it's out of the network. And that hermetically sealed round rectangle is just a token for getting to Facebook or Google or what have you. So, you know, we've got to figure out a way of, rather than having a human hunt tech, getting at the essence of those apps, getting at the soul of those apps and the services that they represent, and putting them in a common substrate where you can orchestrate their behavior. And the way you do that is by cracking those shells open and turning the applications inside out, and having those services and those experiences live on a common substrate, which don't have hard boundaries that today we navigate by clicking on a bunch of buttons. Tomorrow we need to orchestrate with live intelligence and systems that really understand what you want and what you need.
It turns out that when you crack open these applications and pull out their essence, the parts of the application that are relevant for a driver are actually, fairly few and fairly common, right? I mean, what's important to a driver who's in their car? It's really just, it's people, it's places, it's media, and all these applications are a means to an end. They're, the audiobooks application is a way of, listening to the book that you're currently listening to while you're outside of the car. The internet radio app, the restaurant finding app, these are all just opportunities to find locations that your car can route to, or destinations, or people to call, or people to interact with.
Yeah, so one really interesting common substrate is navigation. I mean, today we put an enormous amount of electronics in a vehicle, a lot of transistors, a lot of glass, to navigate to unfamiliar places. Well, most of the time we're not going to unfamiliar places. We're going to familiar places, and we want the navigation to be more active and provide more value than typing in an address or somewhere I don't know about. So navigation as a desktop, navigation as a common substrate, gives you a way of layering on gas and parking and social networking. Where are my friends? Where are my buddies? And they can live on that and be orchestrated on that common substrate. And because nav is always running, it knows and learns a lot about who you are, where you go, where you like to buy gas, which freeways do you take home, where you live, where you go to work. And that persistent knowledge is the stuff that good prediction, good orchestration, and situational awareness comes from.
It's fascinating how little information and how little you need to watch a driver in order to have an excellent prediction of where they're going to go when they get in the car in the morning. I'm incredibly easy to predict. If I get in the car on a weekday morning by myself, odds are very high that I'm going to work. If I get in the car at the same time, the same day, and I'm there with my son, very little chance I'm going to work. Very high probability I'm going to school. And so with just small amounts of information, your car can have a very good idea of where you're going to go. If I have a counter appointment in San Francisco for a meeting that morning, I'm not going to go to work. I'm going to go to San Francisco. And if your car can have a good idea of where you're going to go before you even left the garage, then it can add value along the way. It can tell you, hey, this is the fastest path. Hey, your friends are actually on the way at Starbucks. You want to stop?
Yeah, and unlike the hermetically sealed apps, these services know about each other, and they can make decisions based on what the other services have learned, what they do. You can also bring the context from the rest of your life into the vehicle and have the services and experiences and context roam inside the vehicle in a seamless way. And again, because it knows so much about you, and because it has so much context on which to draw, the decisions it makes about what to listen to, where you want to go, can be much richer. And that you start to find in this world some really interesting things that happen with services that are bizarre and complex and sort of poster children for driver abstraction, turn inside out and become extremely simple. I mean, if I want to think about one of the other capabilities of my attractive co-pilots out there, they can listen to my voice and they can know from the context of the conversation what I mean when I say something and when I answer something. Voice has really changed. It's been a real knee in the curve of voice technology, and it's getting scary good, especially with cloud connected.
It's very interesting because voice interactivity and voice commands are actually created for the car environment. And that's the thing that pushed it from the early days. And now the capabilities to respond to voice with the latest connected voice technologies are fascinating.
Yeah, and so now if I'm concerned that I'm blowing the meeting or something, I can simply say something like, email Bruce, I'm going to be late. Or, tweet my location. Or share my location on Facebook. And that's the extent of the integration of those services. There's no keyboard, there's no typing, there's no logging, there's none of that stuff. It's just say something that the passenger would recognize. And it's really creepy how good the recognition is getting and how seamlessly those services integrate. Because those services aren't the phonetic SEO apps on the phone. They integrate in the cloud where you don't have to do a software operator vehicle to make it happen. So it becomes pretty seamless to layer in stuff that's important to you without ever touching the software to you, without ever sending out a USB stick or having read the hardware in the audio.
I've always been confounded by why people say they want Facebook in their car. And I've never been able to come up with a good reason for it. It seems like, the perfect example of driver distraction. But as Peter pointed out, the connected nature of society today, actually, when you take away that connectivity, it creates anxiety. And anxiety for the driver is not a good thing. If I'm going to be late, if I'm going to be substantially late, for an event or to pick up my son, being able to let them know I'm going to be late in an efficient way, and it doesn't take away from me concentrating on the road, decreases my anxiety. And I want to do more than just tell them I'm going to be late, because then when traffic changes and I'm going to be more late, I prefer to actually just share with them my trip so that it's always live. And as I get later or earlier, they know where I am and they know when I'm going to be there. And that takes a lot of pressure off of me as a driver.
Yeah, it's great to have, it's great to allow hands-free phone calls in the vehicle, but if that hands-free phone call is to a conference call, and the passcode I have to type in is my email, and that's not going to happen, that's a disaster. The car should know that you have a calendar event, the car should know that there's a bridge, the car should type it in. You shouldn't have to worry about any of that sort of stuff. And that, the vast majority of these, when you take the vast majority of these things, things that people will habitually do, whether it's legal or not, whether it's safe or not, I think we can address in software once we can the essence of that. I think we have a few examples of what that looks like. So when I get in my car, it already knows who I am. It knows where I go and knows that 280 is a better round. Navigation as the desktop, as a common substrate, is the mechanism and is the mode that software runs in the vehicle. Okay, some more. And so my people, places, and media are all living side by side on that navigation substrate. And while I'm driving, I have my music, it knows what I'm listening to, and that media comes from my phone or it comes from the cloud, it doesn't matter where it is. It knows where I want to go, and even if that destination changes because my friend's going somewhere else, or if there's a unexpected change in road conditions, it's smart enough to make helpful suggestions about where to go. I mean, I don't know how many times I've been engaged with some of these passengers who say, which is the best way? I was like, well, green or red, or which is the best way? Which gets me there faster.
You shouldn't have to phone a friend and ask them to look up on the internet what the best route home is.
Yeah, cars know when they're running out of gas. Cars know how far they know their range. They can be more proactive about making the right choices. They mentioned earlier that voice is really manually scrolling through lists or navigating in new hierarchies with touch, or even with steering wheel controls, it's just a mistake. And we think that most of these experiences keep off using voice as a way of interacting with people.
Voice is really the key enabler that touch was for smartphones for the driver in the car.
And you want to be able to have the car in a situation where you want to be able to take a phone call, but you also still want to know which exits to take. The vehicle needs to orchestrate the information to get the most important thing in front of you. The things that aren't important for you to address the entirety of the driving necessary. And that, if the car knows you're going into a meeting, it can send the note saying you're late. It can tell who you're meeting when they're going to show up. And that this idea of projecting out of the car, so push what you're driving, what you're listening to, where you are, where you're going, out to those that you care about knowing, can be as simple as share my Facebook or tweet my location. Right, good. So, this is an example of what you get on Facebook, and there's a live app that updates as you are continuing the journey.
It's an interesting version of, we're all worrying about how we bring the rest of the world into the car. And that example shows how you take your environment in the car and actually share it out with the rest of the world. When the first iPhones came out, every time you send an email, it said sent to my iPhone. In this scenario, you should share not only where I am and when I'm going to be there, but the fact that I'm driving the latest Corvette and I'm listening to my favorite music.
The interesting thing about this process is that as we work through making something which meets the requirements of being a vehicle, which is simple, which is flexible, which does what you want it to do, which is predictive, which is situationally aware, realize, well, there's nothing about that isn't good outside the car as well. There's nothing about that isn't good on the phone. And that there's been no evolutionary imperative for phones to evolve because they have your attention, they can fully consume your physical and cognitive abilities to make them work. So they've not had the evolutionary imperative. Cars are a harder problem. It's a more subtle user experience design problem. And I think
and a much more demanding one, right? Because the driver has to be spending 110% of their time driving. So augmenting that, supporting that, and having, making it easier, safer, and less anxious is a much harder problem than what people are trying to solve at the moment.
Yeah, so that difficult design problem has forced evolution of the software and the experiences. And that sort of thing has happened before. I think the irony is there's a bunch of people who are demanding just left-only car, and I think what winds up happening is the change in the user experience happens in the car first. And those higher demands, that higher bar, makes that software richer and smarter and demands more subtlety and integration. And I think I think what happens in cars will wind up being reflected back in the phones and other devices. And this isn't the first time something like that's happened.
No, I mean, I think that, an excellent example that I think we're all familiar with is the iPad. In that, the iPad wasn't the first attempt at a tablet computing solution. Tablet computers have been around for decades. No one's really cared. And the reason is that previous attempts at tablet computing were basically, how do I take a computer and make a mobile version of it? And, trying to take a mouse and turn it into a stylus, the results were just never compelling. The tablet computers before the iPad never did anything better than desktop computers. The iPad said, hey, I'm going to start from a clean slate. I don't have to bring the desktop with me. If I'm going to reach a higher bar to make internet browsing better and more compelling on a tablet, using some breakthrough technologies like multi-touch, I can have a solution that, well, we'll have to create a whole new ecosystem. I can have a solution that's incredibly magical. It does things that weren't possible before on desktop.
Yeah, the irony is, so the iPad was derided for that, right? Because people just didn't understand that it was something different. The things that seem to make sense, the faster horses are the ones that fail. right? The smartphones without touchscreen, or the tablets that use touch during the regular mouse. I mean, they were classic class of horses. Putting the phone with the current app ecosystem or aping the current app ecosystem in the car is a class of horse. So we need to think about the change that makes it.
And now, the rage in desktop computers is to learn from the iPad and to bring those types of experiences back to the desktop. And, the right measure of success for a car is when people want to demand the experience they have in their cars on their phone.